All right, let's get into it.
Okay, let's get into
Okay.
it.
Hello, everybody, and thank you for coming. My name's Melissa France, and I am so very honored to be here in this conversation with my dear friend. Gabby Pelicci is one of the bravest people I know. She's not a skydiver or a rock climber, and she doesn't do any of that other scary stuff or death defying things. What she did and continues to do is something much scarier. Hers is the journey of self discovery. It's the hard work of digging deep and uncovering the toxic waste that sabotages our lives. She fearlessly worked on the trauma that began during the early years of her life. Excuse me, I have to have notes. And the journey was not easy. It enabled her to come into the light. During our time together tonight, we're going to get to an honest and raw view of how she navigated her heroine's journey. I hope it inspires you and motivates you to want more and to start your own journey and to buy her book. All this healing is killing me. So let us begin.
Can I say something about you really quickly?
Yes.
So, I have a couple of book bridesmaids here that made this event possible. One of them is Melissa, and Nick Arnett was supposed to be interviewing me tonight, but he had a family emergency. And so I texted Melissa 2 days ago and I was like, can you please interview me? And first she freaked out. And then she said, yes, of course. And then she went back and studied the book for the 10th time and made a list of questions. So I just want to honor you and thank you so much for helping me tonight. Elizabeth Irizarry was also indispensable. She did my hair and makeup.
That's important, you know.
And helped me beautify for the event. Also, Jamie Nolan, who's my longtime bestie, who was checking you in at the table over there, who received this book via text message during the pandemic. So likely this book would not be born if it weren't for Jamie receiving my text messages. Jen Todd, I just want to acknowledge you as well, who's been a tremendous support in helping me to organize and invite people to the event. And last but not least is my sister Jenny, who's here in the front row, who came in at the last minute to wipe my tears from my face when I was crying today because I was so nervous, and to just help ground me and show me love during this process. So I just want to say thank you to all my book bridesmaids for being here today.
Thank you for writing this book. And so we're going to go through, some interview questions, and then we'll open it up for the Q&A. So just so you know how it's going to go. So after that, so what motivated you to write this book and share all of the gory stuff?
So ever since I was about 10 years old, I really, really, really wanted to write a book. So I had a notebook that I carried with me everywhere in elementary school. And I was writing a fantasy novel at the time, a sci-fi novel. And it was an escape. It was a way to escape things that were happening. And in conjunction with that, also kept a diary. So would also write down all of the terrible things that were happening and kept those diaries all the way up until my 20s. And writing for me was a means of processing and dealing with stuff that was going on, and then also escaping things that were going on. It was kind of old. And I had a fantasy from the time that I was really, really young that someday I would be in this moment. And I was saying to Vanessa, like, how hard it is to actually be in this moment. Because when you think about a moment like this for your whole life and you are striving towards something like this for such a long time, it's really surreal to actually be here. And it's been an incredibly long path. It's been a lot of writing and rewriting and working with teachers and working with mentors. But I think I said this to you as well. Like, remember we were talking about dreams and I was like, I just don't want the dream to die, right?
Oh, yeah, I totally remember that.
So like when you have a dream, you have to keep going no matter what is happening, no matter what the obstacle.
It takes a lot to make you sort of crash your dream, for sure.
This has been a lifelong dream to be a writer.
It was a meant to be kind of a thing for you. So, I know Gabby. We've been friends for a long time. And even while you were full speed ahead on this journey. And we met at Waffle Wednesday. And for those of you who don't know what Waffle Wednesday was, it was this networking thing that happened in Wynwood every Wednesday morning at 9 o'clock. And I remember exactly when we met, and it was an amazing time. But, and when I met you, I thought you were this uber cool chick who lived on a sailboat in Coconut Grove, and I had no idea about what you were going through until we had a few conversations. And then I read the first draft of your book, but you hid it so well. And I think a lot of people who are going through stuff do that. And I want to understand how you did that and talk to us a little bit about that.
So, for those of you who haven't read the book, it covers a lot of adult topics. So, it covers domestic violence. It explores a lot of different kinds of abuse, suicide, mental illness. And there's like a lot of stuff going on in the book. And one of the principles of growing up in an environment like that is that you keep everything a secret. And secrets are the currency. It's the most valuable thing, not to share what's happening and not to expose anything that's happening. And secrets are wrapped in bubble wrap of shame. You know, there's just layers of shame around the secrets that are preventing you from exposing any of that. I can't tell you exactly why that's the way it is, but that's just the way that it is. And so I became very masterful at disguising my secrets. And if you met me, we met about a decade ago, you would have thought my life was effortless. You would have thought like she has a Ph.D. and she's a professor and she lives on a sailboat, and it seemed very glamorous. And in some respects it was, because I really thrive under hardship, and I can really like use that as alchemy, use that as, you know, grist for the mill, so to say. And I did that really well for a really long time until I couldn't do it anymore. But performing and pretending that everything was okay was a survival for a long time. It meant that I could navigate through life. I could finish school. I could get jobs. I could survive. And so I had to do it until I couldn't do it anymore.
So were those kind of like steps along the way that sort of catapulted you into like really doing the harder work all along the way?
All along, I was doing different healing modalities. So if you read the book, you learn how I did a massage therapy certification and a yoga certification, and I went to a psychotherapist, and I tried different medications. So you learn about all the things that I tried. A lot of it was to manage symptoms, because when you have a lot of complex trauma, you have a lot of symptoms. You have anxiety and panic attacks. You have headaches. It manifests in a lot of different physical and mental things. So I was engaging in a lot of practices to try to manage those symptoms so that I could look, you know, very put together in real life, and present well. And little by little, those things were healing different aspects. I mean, the depth of trauma that I had, it needed a lot of healing over time, and there was a lot of layers to work on. So they were helping me to heal and work on some of those layers, but also, I think you have to kind of get to a rock bottom sometimes to like really do the hardest work. And that didn't happen. Yeah.
What was that for you?
So that happened about 5 years ago. So this draft that you're holding in your hand was written during the pandemic. The first draft that you'll never see was written in 2007, a month after I finished my doctoral dissertation. So I did a doctoral dissertation about women healers, and I interviewed women that were practicing medicine all over the world in different countries, and I was just madly in love with them. And the practices were based in indigenous medicine and shamanic medicine. And then I documented their life stories, and I looked for themes in their life stories, and I closed the book on that, and I got my certificate. And then I had a very strong feeling that I also needed to tell my own story. But I was at the beginning of my journey as a healer. I was a very young healer. I didn't even really know what that meant. And so I wrote the first draft of the book in 2007. And then I put it away, and I brought it back out in 2013, and I wrote another draft. And I had an editor look at that version, and she told me that the version was terrible.
They always say that.
So I put it back in the closet. and then finally took it out again during the pandemic with a commitment to actually get it across the finish line. So there's a lot of different iterations of the story, and I was growing and learning as I was writing the book and processing a lot of the stuff that had happened to me while I was writing each different version of the book, which is what I think writing is. I think writing is medicine. I think that by telling yourself your own story, you learn who you are. And like when you learn who you are, you can really show up in a fuller version of yourself, a more whole version of yourself, which I think is really the point of us being here. I think the point of us being here is being the fullest expression of who we actually are. I don't know if that answered your question.
Absolutely. So I want to get a little bit more into the details of the book. So there's a saying that if it's not one thing, it's your mother. And I know that your mother played a very big role in your life, and she became sort of a spirit guide. It's true, right?
It's true.
She became kind of like a spirit guide that almost catapulted you or enabled you or pushed you along the way. So talk to us a little bit about that.
Yes. So my mom died when I was 21, and that's how the book opens. The book opens with my mother's death. And in retrospect, my mother's death was a blessing and a gift, and it saved my life in a lot of ways, because prior to that, I was very spiritually disconnected. I grew up in the Catholic Church and I went to Catholic school for a dozen years, but I wasn't like spiritually grounded and connected. Hi, Roberto. And what happened is I had a mystical experience at my mother's funeral where it was like psychedelic LSD tripping, and I was completely sober. I never tripped in my life, but some kind of mystical experience happened, and then I could communicate with my mom for a long time. And I write about how that relationship developed over my lifetime in the book. And it was the thing that guided all of the decisions that I made in my career. It was the reason that I sought out different spiritual practices. It was the reason that I pursued healing arts and my Ph.D. It was the reason that I studied energy medicine, because it took me at least 10 years to understand what that experience was, because we don't have a language for that in our culture. We're a culture that's really separated from spiritual experiences, as opposed to other cultures where this is kind of the norm, talking to your ancestors or communicating. And that's not the norm here. And I had no context and I had no understanding. So it took me about a decade to figure it out. And I really felt her presence for that whole time and continue to feel her presence. The most recent communication I had with my mom was during the pandemic. I was living with a medicine woman in New Mexico, and my mom just came into the room where I was, and she told me, my brother's coming to live with me in 2 months. And so my mother had a brother, and the interpretation that I got from the message was that my uncle was going to pass, and that he was going to, pass within 2 months. And so I called my aunt and I said, have you talked to Bill? And she's like, no. And I was like, I think you need to talk to Bill. He's not going to be here very much longer. And 2 months to the day, Bill crossed over to be with my mother. So it's become something that is somewhat normal. Like, it's weird to say, but I do feel that the intangible transpersonal realm is accessible to me because of my mom and the experience that I had with her. And she continues to communicate with me even now.
Amazing. That's pretty powerful. So you've also done an amazing amount of traveling in your life. I mean, I don't know anybody that's been more places than you. And so I wanted you to talk about like the travel and what role that was playing in everything that you were going through, and the role that it continues to play, because you're still pretty, mobile, and you're moving. You're not, you don't stay in one place for too long.
Yeah. There's something inside of me that is perpetually hungry for experience and for adventure. And I think we're conditioned to suppress or repress that and just kind of do whatever we're told to do. And I don't know if it was just a lack of willpower or my crazy personality, but like I just couldn't. I had to go. Like I just had to go. The first time I left home, I was 17. I went to New York to do modeling, and it was just nonstop from there, like traveling to 50 different countries, living in very strange places, learning different modalities, living with different healers. It was just a calling.
And you put yourself into some pretty kind of dangerous situations. I mean, it was like took a lot of trust, and you just went there.
Yeah, I think I'm calibrated a little bit differently because the risk of staying home was greater than the risk of going. I had to go. When I get a really strong calling or a really strong pull towards something, it's almost like in the Mario Brothers. Like you go there and you're like, there's some jewel or some gem, on the next level. It's like this. I know something's there. I know something's there that I have to have, or I have to find, or it's a meaningful part of my development, or some nugget of wisdom that's going to be really critical. And I just have to go. And what's been such a blessing is that the people that are in this room, you guys have taken me back many times, because I've left and come back, and I've left and I've come back, and you guys always take me back. And some of you take me in, and
this is your home,
sleep
Gabby.
on your floor. I've watched your cats when you go on vacation. Like the people, you guys always take me back, and that I believe that you need that too. I don't believe that you just keep going, in perpetuity. I think you bring gifts home. I think this is one of the gifts that I'm bringing back to you, is that I went and I found the things and I wrote them down, and I'm bringing them back. And I think that it's important to have a place that you're coming home to. And for me, that's Miami. It just has been for a very long time.
I want to also talk about, like, you have done a lot of different modalities, from yoga to breath work to craniosacral, and now currently plant medicine.
Yeah.
So I want you to talk a little bit about all those experiences, what you got from each one, and what has kind of resonated with you the most.
So my father was a psychiatrist and a neurologist, and we had a pharmacy of medicine in the cabinets at home when I was growing up. And no matter what your condition or your symptom, there was a medicine for it. So from the time I was 0 years old, I was on medicines for things. I don't even know what the medicines were, but I was on medicines for everything. Every cough, every sneeze, every mood swing, I was on a medicine. And then when I got into psychology after my mom died and I started exploring the mind-body connection, I remember the moment that I had my first massage, and she put her hands on me, and like I could feel everything moving and shifting and releasing. And I was like, holy shit. Like, this is like a non-medicine experience of healing that I'm having right now. And it was completely life-changing. I like immediately enrolled in massage school. And one of the nice things about the school that I was at is they had exposure hours. So they would introduce you to a lot of different practitioners, and I was able to dabble in a lot of things, and kept finding with each modality, like Roberto, who I just said hello to, was one of my breathwork instructors. I've also known him for about a decade. Like, one of the things about exploring these modalities is they give you deeper access to yourself, and they unravel the areas inside of you that are stuck. And there's just unlimited ways without medication to really access yourself and to transform yourself. And I did that for a very long time, until I got to a point about 5 years ago where nothing would work anymore, which happens sometimes. Sometimes you can do all the breath work and all the yoga and all the meditation, and it just doesn't work anymore. I was like, God damn it. Why is this not working? And the universe serendipitously dropped me in the lap of a medicine woman in New Mexico who was preparing peyote for sacred ceremonies with the native community there. And so I started harvesting and microdosing on peyote. And I felt a new relationship developing with the plants. I felt an experience of the plants becoming an ally in my healing process, which if you had asked me a few years earlier if that would ever be possible,
I remember.
it would never, ever have happened. I worked in addiction treatment centers. I was terrified of any kind of medicine that would alter your consciousness. I was sure that I would become psychotic and like never recover. And slowly but surely developed a relationship with these plants, developed a relationship with mushrooms, developed a relationship with ayahuasca, and found that that was what I needed at the end of my journey to really break through some of the things that were still holding me back. But that was after a lifetime of a lot of other practices kind of graduating to the plants for me.
And when you say you developed a relationship, like what is that? What is like developing a relationship with plant medicine? Like what is that?
Right. So one of the findings in my dissertation research that I did was that nature is a teacher and a tool for healing. So, in all cultures all over the world for all of time, we have believed that there's a natural intelligence in the universe. We have believed that plants are intelligent, that the earth is intelligent, that all of it is alive and supporting us. And in the last 200 years, with the growth of Western medicine, we have removed all of that wisdom from our medicine. And so many of us that grew up just in the Western model, we don't even realize that this is thousands of years of history and culture around the sentience of nature and medicine. And so what I reconnected with during the pandemic as I was living on farms and working with different healers was that intelligence, the intelligence that's in the planet, the intelligence that's in the bacteria in the soil, the intelligence that's in the ayahuasca vine or the fungi. There's a really deep wisdom there. These things have been on the planet for millions and millions of years, and they have something to teach us if we're open to listening to it. And I wasn't open to listening to it until a short time ago. And now that I've connected with that, it's a similar kind of relationship that I have with my mom. Like, when I say, hi, Tanya, when I say that I talk to the plants, it's the same as kind of like how I talk to my mom, right? It's just it's a relationship that it goes beyond our normal reality, our normal means of communication.
I know when, they talk about plant medicine and, the neurological pathways, that's how we kind of scientifically describe that. Does it sort of feel that way to you?
Yeah.
Or
Yeah. I think if you've ever seen any of the images that are floating around on the internet, how our fingerprint looks like the stump of a tree or how our lungs look like branches, I do think that we're made of stardust and dirt and worms and all of it. I think that somehow we got into this mindset of being separate from nature, but we are nature. When we die, we will decompose into the dirt like everything else. We are nature. We're made of nature. And so like cultivating that relationship has been a completely different shift. It's completely shifted my relationship to the planet and everything that's on the planet. And that's not something that I was anticipating. And in the ingestion of taking in these substances, I've felt them regenerating me on the inside in the same way that they might, like a mushroom will break down toxins, right, in the environment. I feel them doing that inside of me and regenerating me on the inside and building a kind of resilience that I didn't really know was possible. Well, I wanted to read you, like, the first time I moved to Miami was in 2002. So because we're in Miami, I just wanted to read you like a page about what it was like the first time that I came to Miami. I was so infatuated. So driving across the causeway to South Beach, I gasped at the mega mansions and $1 million yachts. Miami was the most beautiful city I had ever seen. I settled into a sweet 1-bedroom apartment in an Art Deco building a few blocks from the beach, where gorgeous girls in thong bikinis and shirtless boys with glistening skin gathered for sunbathing and volleyball games. A week later, I got a gig at a local spot called Massage by Design, with a steady stream of rich and famous clients. Miami customers had an infinite amount of money to spend on pleasuring themselves. For a short time, every part of my body felt at ease, and the critical commentary in my mind was quiet. At first, I did 1 or 2 treatments a week, but Soon I did 3 or 4 a day. I also provided resources and support for self-care, life transition, stress management, and personal growth. I tried to balance my approach to include both Western medicine and alternative medicine. I restrained from saying too much about energy or things like chakras for fear of being seen as woo-woo, even though I didn't see my teachers that way. I spent my first year in Miami vacillating between serious dissertation preparations on the computer and increasingly indulgences in the city's many seductions. Miami is a world of shiny objects. It begs you to enjoy life to the fullest. Anything you want, from love affairs to exotic cars, is at your fingertips. If you're a young, beautiful woman, it's even more accessible. All I had to do was walk into a restaurant, and within minutes, men were buying me drinks and dinner and inviting me back to their homes or hotel rooms. For someone like me who needed a lot of stimulation and attention, it was irresistible. I wasn't into drugs or alcohol, but I didn't need them in Miami. I could get my fix with all-night Latin beats, last-minute trips to the Keys, shopping sprees, and romantic infatuations. If I were a healthy, happy woman, Miami might have been a godsend, but I didn't know who I was. There was no solidity to me. I was a free spirit, completely ungrounded. I had no sense of home or roots or center of gravity. I didn't know what was true for me. I grasped, reached out, sought out, and experimented with insatiable urgency. I was whirling, caught in a storm of ideas and inspiration, but also easily overwhelmed. The energy would grow so strong I'd get really wired and unable to sleep, and I'd stay up all night reading, writing, giving massages all day, and then out dancing until I crashed in exhaustion. Does that resonate with anyone when they came to Miami?
So that's like the first third of the book, let's say.
Yeah.
So you're like just starting to get into like all the nitty gritty, having a blast, but knowing that like this is not reality and or right for moi. So talk a little bit,
Okay.
like let's transition
So
a
then I
little.
did a lot of travel. I left Miami. I lived in California for some time. I worked in addiction treatment centers. I lived in Philadelphia for some time. I met a German guy. I moved to Germany. I came back. I bought a sailboat. I lived on a sailboat in Miami, which was the second time Miami took me back. And then it was all boats and regattas and beautiful sailors.
Woohoo!
And then
It's hard to give that stuff up.
yeah, especially because it's so easy.
Right. So
Right?
how did you give it up,
Well, the sad truth is I had a suicide attempt on the beach in Miami in 2005 because I couldn't handle it. I couldn't handle the amount of stimulation. I couldn't handle the ungroundedness, the rootlessness. I couldn't handle the trauma that I was carrying. And so that ejected me out of Miami and put me further down the healing path. It took me a really long time to tell anybody that happened. There's not very many people that know that that happened. Like I could count on my hand how many people knew until I wrote the book. And I think that it's unfortunate that it's so shameful to talk about the things that happen that, come from this deep pain and this deep trauma. And the fact that like this was part of my story, I couldn't own it for a very, very long time. When I was texting Jamie the chapters during the pandemic, I was terrified. She had already known me for years. I was terrified to tell her that that was part of my story. And I kept like texting her, like, are we still friends? Do you still like me? I was really concerned. And I think the stigma has kind of been shifting over my lifetime, at least, so that it's not as shameful that you have some of these things as part of your story. But for me, it took a lot of work to be able to tell you and to be able to tell people that this was part of my personal history. It was really hard. And I think that it's important because I think that it's more common than we than we know.
Absolutely. So, like, for a person who, like, what's some advice that you could give somebody about starting that journey? Like, where's, what's the first step?
I remember having moments where there I had to find one thing that was worth living for, and it didn't have to be a big thing. Like for a long time I had a really intimate relationship with my cat. My cat was my best friend. And it just having that one relationship was enough of a motivation to do the really hard things. It doesn't have to be a big thing, but you have to want it. Some part of you has to want to live better than you're living right now. Some part of you has to want to break through the shit that's holding you back. Some part of you has to want a better quality of life. Like there needs to be something. And if it's not, at the top of your mind, you have to find it. And there were so many times during the whole journey, all of the years and all the practices where I would have to write down the reasons I was doing it. And it would often just be a sheet of paper with names of people that I knew would be really pissed off if something happened to me. Like sometimes it was just a few people that I was like, okay, I can't really get through this day today, but I'm going to get through this day for these 5 people that I just wrote down. Like I'm going to get through the day for those people. So you need a reason. You need a reason, because the reason that I called it All This Healing Is Killing Me, it's like tongue in cheek. It's meant to be kind of ironic, but it's also a tribute to how hard it is to do this stuff. Like you really have to be a warrior. You really have to dig deep to do honest personal growth and honest healing. And you need a reason to do it. So the last chapter of the book was I checked myself into a rehab for a week because I had a terrible breakup and I just like couldn't get my shit together, and I was having daily panic attacks, and I felt, did you ever have that feeling where like everything you stuffed in every closet, like all the hinges have come off all the doors, and like there's nowhere to stuff anything anymore? Like everything is just bursting at the seams. There's nowhere to put it. Like I had just gotten to that point where there was nowhere to put anything. So I checked myself into this place in Arizona and met this like amazing woman who helped me. But so this is the first page of that journey. There's a saying in addiction recovery, you're only as sick as your secrets. If you want to convince other people something didn't happen, the best way is to convince yourself first. I managed to arrive at 45 years of age believing nothing that bad had happened to me. I had walled off certain thoughts and emotions related to my secrets that not only blocked my connection to others, but also made me vulnerable to the worst kinds of manipulations. My secrets were ugly. They were forbidden. And I was sure beyond a shadow of a doubt that if anyone heard them, they would never want to be close to me again. They say confronting your secrets is the first step in being honest with yourself, and that exposing your secrets to the light takes away their power and relieves you of their burden. What they don't say is that secrets will do everything in their power to remain secrets. You may have to shatter your entire life to release them. Cracks, after all, are where the light gets in. And that's really what happened. That's what happened on that journey when I was in that place. And then I've spent the last couple of years integrating that experience. And I can tell you with wholehearted honesty that I feel the most serenity and contentment and spaciousness that I've ever felt in my life. It honestly feels like carrying this story around with me for so long, it was such a heavy baggage, as like cliche as it may sound, and really finally kind of putting it on paper and releasing it has created so much space that I didn't even know was possible. Like I didn't even know it was possible to feel this light. And that's where I am right now.
So, what's next for you?
What's next for me is answering your questions. Did anybody write anything down on the cards? Once you do this, everything else is so much easier. Like once you tell your full story and it's witnessed by, it could be one person. It doesn't have to be the whole world. It doesn't have to be a novel, but once you're witnessed, you create such a resilience in authenticity that now it's so much easier for me to tell the truth. It's just so much easier. And I trust that all those catastrophic expectations that I had previously, they don't apply. So when the gremlins show up being like, don't say that, don't do that, that's a secret, that's shameful, I'm like, what? Like, back off. Like, we've been down this road. I've said all the things and people love me, and it empowers them to say all their things too. And it just shifts my center of gravity. It just shifts my commitments. It shifts my loyalty. My loyalty is to my authenticity. That's where my loyalty lies now. And it wasn't there before. And so it's honestly, so it doesn't mean that I don't have awkward conversations where I have to say to somebody something that's like a little bit awkward, but it's not full on panic attack running out of the room crying. It's like, oh, this is a little bit uncomfortable. Like, I can handle a little bit uncomfortable. Like, I'm a grown adult. So it's just completely transformed my relationship to those interactions. I have to have a reason. I know I've said that. So sometimes, okay, so this morning I went to the gym. I'll use this party as an example. I have been freaking the fuck out about this party for 3 months. And my book bridesmaids can tell you that, because they have received unlimited text messages and phone calls for 3 months about how, and emails, group emails, and spreadsheets that I made for the party, because I have been freaking out about the party. Okay. But again, my loyalty was to authenticity. And the reason that I'm here is because I've been in your chair for 30 years. I have been going to these events. I have been reading these books. I have been asking authors to sign my copy of their book. And it has meant everything. It has meant everything to me. Especially Nick Garnett was supposed to be here interviewing me. He published a memoir called In the Pink. I was crying when he was at Miami Book Fair, and he was signing his book for me, and I looked at him and I was like, this gives me so much hope. He's like, it makes you think it's actually possible, right? And I was like, yes, right? So I had to get up this morning at 7:00 and go to the gym and work out at the gym to like work through some of the anxiety. And as I'm like on the gym treadmill processing my emotions, I'm saying to myself, you're not there for you. You're there for them. You're not there for you. This is not about me. And it's about you. It's about if there's one person in this room today that wants to write something or say something that they're scared to do and they do it anyway, then this whole thing, this whole shenanigans, all of it was worth it if there's one person in this room that walks away from this, like I did when I was at Nick's event. So that's my reason, and I always have to have that, or I couldn't have gotten up this morning and gone to the gym and like put on a princess dress and like, do you know what I mean, sat up here to tell you all the things about myself that I don't want you to know. There has to be some why. And the why is because somebody in here needs this tonight. Somebody needs it, you know? And that's why. The first draft of the book, that was enough. Like the draft that was not a public version, it was enough that I needed it. And it was enough that I needed someone to witness it and still love me. It was enough. But for this to like come here and sit up here like in front of you, I needed more. I needed more than just my own satisfaction. I needed some other purpose to be here for this. The reason that the editor in 2013 told me that the book was terrible was because I wrote down every single thing that had ever happened to me and gave it to her. And I was like, a book? Is it a book? And she was like, no, it's definitely not a book. So what I've had to do from that version, which was twice as long as this version, is the trimming the fat, right? Finding the themes, making sure that every sentence in the book is somehow connected to a theme that I identified as being the main channels in my life. And making sure that all of it was connected to those. And that didn't happen until the very last edition, because actually Melissa and Jamie and maybe Michelle, you guys read the version before this version, and that one was still pretty wonky. That one was still pretty tangential and fragmented. And it's only, I worked with a very expert editor on this last version. It was only in this last version that she really held those lines, held those boundaries for me, so that you guys didn't read it and go, oh my God, what's happening? I can only speak from experience. The first version of this was just a journal entry to myself. So I think it's important just to get it out, even if it's something that you feel like I can never show this to anybody. The most important thing is that you just get it out of your body and just get it in your journal, just get it in your computer, whatever. Just get the first version out. If you can then summon some courage to show it to one person, show it to one person. I think that first person, like, even though the feedback wasn't great, it was such a breakthrough in overcoming the fears of being seen, because so much of what you're afraid of is people seeing who you actually are. That's like what you're afraid of. And so overcoming that, each time you do it, it gets like a little bit easier. And then, like, if you actually want it to be a book, my best advice is work with really, really good book doulas. Like, that's what I call the woman I worked with. She like pulls the book out of your vagina and puts it into the world. Like, you need a book doula. You need someone, you need to commit to them, and you need to say, it is my commitment to birth this, and I will do anything you say. And then you need to let her pull it out of you. And it was only in that final commitment that it really kind of, physically left my body. I know a lot of people in their 20s. I worked with them on different farms and volunteer projects, and they're pretty enlightened. Have you guys hung out with people in their 20s lately? Like, they're pretty remarkable. It's remarkable. I think they're way more advanced than us. There's something about them, but if they're not, if they're really struggling, I think that in each moment of your life, there's still value. Like, I was still making a valuable contribution to the world in my 20s. I was still working, and I was still teaching, and I was still making a valuable contribution. It would be a lot longer until I felt really good in my skin. And I don't believe that there was anything that I could do to accelerate that. I just think I needed that much time to get there. But it doesn't mean that you're not cultivating joy along the way. There's no reason why you can't be having joy at every step of your journey. You should be finding things all the time, every day, that are bringing you joy. I'm actually reading right now Pleasure Activism, which I highly recommend. Are you reading it? Isn't it the best? And it's about the practice of pleasure and making pleasure a priority every day. And so I think that we should all have a practice of pleasure. And she says, how Marlene, she's like, I think you need to have an orgasm every time you pick up this book. So put the book down and have an orgasm and then come back. Isn't she great? So good. So a pleasure practice. I would encourage a pleasure practice, and you'll get there when you get there. Thank you. So she's saying you were holding a lot of pain since the time you were very young until very recently, and that must have been really difficult. Yeah, it sucked. It completely sucked. It was very uncomfortable. It was physically uncomfortable. It was emotionally uncomfortable. But I'm someone who's very playful and very silly, and pretty much everyone in this room already knows that, because you've seen me go silly and go dancing and wear costumes. And so I think humans have an incredible resilience. It's this unbelievable paradox between vulnerability and resilience, right? We're like the most incredibly vulnerable, delicate beings, and we're the most incredibly strong, profoundly resilient beings at the same exact time. And so I think a lot of it has to do with luck. I just got lucky that I was able to surround myself by all you guys. I mean, like, you don't get through this life alone, right? Every time I was shedding a tear or like having a breakdown, someone in this room came to my rescue. So I think you have to surround yourself with really good people until you can find your freedom. Thank you guys for coming out.